We believed we were alone in our wisdom. That belief died the moment the human signal reached the Grand Concord. I remember the exact instant it happened. The chamber, vast enough to contain a moonlet, fell into a silence so complete that even our atmospheric stabilizers seemed to hush. Streams of alien languages scrolled across crystalline displays as the transmission was decoded. At first, it was nothing but numbers, prime sequences, physical constants, the timid fingerprints of a species knocking on a door it did not know would open. Then the numbers became words. Not demands, not threats. Words. I am a Kellar observer, I should say, for context matters among historians. My kind has witnessed the rise and extinction of more civilizations than most species can name. We have seen conquerors announce themselves with fire. We have seen beggars plead for mercy before annihilation. Never, never had we seen a species introduce itself the way humans did. They spoke of cooperation, of shared survival, of unity beyond biology. The chamber rippled with subdued amusement. Some delegates emitted pheromones of mockery. Others allowed their bioluminescent crests to flare in open disdain. Humanity, we were told, was young, violently young, a species that had barely escaped its home gravity well, scarred by endless internal wars, fractured by ideology and borders. And yet here they were, addressing the galaxy as equals. I watched their visual feed closely. Blue oceans wrapped their world like living glass. Cities burned with artificial light against planetary night, sprawling and imperfect. Their orbital stations were asymmetrical, patched together like scars that refused to fade. Nothing about their infrastructure suggested elegance, but their eyes did. There was something in the way humans looked into their cameras, direct, unflinching. No submissive tilt of the head, no overcompensating arrogance. They did not kneel, they did not boast. They offered. Peace, they said, was not the absence of conflict, but the choice to face it together. They offered access to their science, still crude by our standards, but innovative in ways that made some analysts uneasy. They offered their art, music shaped by grief and hope, visual stories obsessed with survival against impossible odds. Most disturbingly, they offered their history in full. Every war, every atrocity, every near extinction they had inflicted upon themselves. That was when the laughter truly began.
Ancient species scoffed at the idea that failure was a credential. Empires, millions of cycles old, dismissed humanity as naive idealists, unaware of the brutal arithmetic of galactic politics. Some saw opportunity instead, an upstart species ripe for containment, exploitation, or proxy control. As debates ignited, I felt something coil within my thoracic cavity. Unease. I have studied evolutionary psychology across 1,000 worlds. Species that annihilate themselves rarely survive long enough to send greetings to the stars. Humanity had come close, frighteningly close, multiple times. Nuclear fire, engineered plagues, ecological collapse, and yet they were still here. A species does not endure its own adolescence without learning terrible lessons. The Concord deliberations stretched across cycles. Committees formed, risk assessments compiled, military projections simulated. Humans waited. They did not interrupt. They did not send follow-up pleas. Their channel remained open, silent, patient. That patience unsettled me more than any threat display could have. When the final vote was cast, the result was decisive. Rejection. Earth's proposal for peaceful integration was denied. Trade embargoes followed, justified as containment. Military oversight of human expansion corridors was approved, framed as protection, for us, not them. The official reasoning was clinical. Humanity was deemed unpredictable, emotion-driven, potentially destabilizing. I watched the human delegate receive the decision. No outburst followed, no protest. Their shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. Their eyes dimmed, not with despair, but with something colder, understanding. "Thank you," the human said at last, inclining their head in a gesture that was neither submission nor defiance. The channel closed. Around me, the chamber began to empty. Delegates conversed, already distracted by the next crisis, the next border dispute, the next manageable war. Humanity was filed away as a problem postponed. I remained where I was, staring at the space where their image had been.
only later, much later, did I realize what truly disturbed me about that final moment. Humans had not asked what would happen if peace was refused. They had already considered it. And as the lights dimmed in the Grand Concord, a single horrifying thought took root in my mind. A species that offers peace without begging has already decided how to survive without it.
That was the first mistake the galaxy ever made regarding humanity, and it would not be the last. History will insist the war began with strategy. That is a lie. It began with fear. Fear does not announce itself as terror among elder species. It disguises itself as reason, as caution, as policy drafted in calm chambers by voices that have forgotten what extinction feels like. After humanity's offer was rejected, the Concord assured itself that the matter was settled, but the silence from Earth did not soothe us. It festered. A species that accepts rejection quietly is either harmless or preparing. The elder races chose to believe the former, even as their actions betrayed the latter. Reports circulated through restricted channels, marked with escalating threat indices. Humanity's technological growth curves did not plateau as predicted. Their manufacturing output surged despite sanctions. Their information networks adapted to isolation with alarming efficiency. This is an anomaly, the Strategos declared. And so fear metastasized into doctrine. They named it preemptive stabilization, a merciful containment, they said, before humanity's unchecked ascent destabilized the balance of the stars. No declarations were sent to Earth, no final warnings, only orders issued behind sealed membranes and encrypted lattices. I watched the fleets assemble. They gathered beneath banners etched with words like order, security, continuity. Vast armadas of ancient design, ships perfected over millennia, crews bred for obedience, weapons tested against civilizations that no longer existed. To many, it was reassurance incarnate. To me, it looked like a funeral procession. Earth was given no time to respond. Hyperlane blockades snapped into place with mechanical precision, severing humanity's trade routes and isolating its outer colonies. What little commerce they had managed to establish beyond their system collapsed overnight. Then came the strikes, carefully calculated, ruthlessly efficient. Orbital platforms shattered above human shipyards. Power grids were crippled with electromagnetic pulses tuned to their infrastructure. Communication satellites fell like burning stars through Earth's atmosphere. The Concord called it restraint. No population centers were targeted. This was, officially, not a war. We expected panic. We expected riots, fragmentation, the familiar pattern of young species collapsing inward as pressure exposed old fractures.
Analysts projected surrender within 3 planetary rotations. Instead, something unprecedented occurred. Humanity unified. Borders that had divided them for centuries dissolved in hours. Rival governments synchronized command structures without negotiation. Civilian industries converted overnight. Cargo haulers reinforced with armor plating. Mining lasers recalibrated into weapons. Fusion plants pushed far beyond safety margins. Their response was not elegant. It was relentless. Intercepted human communications flooded our intelligence nets, and what we found disturbed even the most hardened tacticians. There was no hysteria, no chaos, no desperate pleas for aid. Their voices were steady, efficient, focused. One transmission, intercepted from a subterranean command hub, still echoes in my thoughts. "We've survived worse," a human commander said calmly, as casualty projections scrolled behind them. Worse. They were not speaking of interstellar war. They referenced plagues that had killed billions, climate catastrophes they had inflicted upon themselves, conflicts where entire cities vanished in minutes beneath nuclear fire. To humans, extinction was not theoretical. It was a memory they carried forward. I began to understand then, too late, that the galaxy had misunderstood humanity's peace offering entirely. We had seen humility and assumed weakness. We had seen openness and assumed naivete. We believed them unfinished because they had not yet scarred the stars. But humans were already forged. Their world had been a crucible long before it was a cradle. Evolution on Earth did not reward stability. It rewarded adaptability at any cost. The same species that had nearly erased itself multiple times had also learned how to rebuild from ash with terrifying speed.
As the Concorde fleets advanced toward Seoul, confidence rippled through their ranks. Earth's defenses, we believed, had been neutralized, their shipyards crippled, their economy strangled. The opening blow had landed perfectly. That confidence lasted until our sensors updated. Human vessels were moving, not fleeing, mobilizing. Deep space arrays detected energy signatures that did not align with known human capabilities. Hidden construction yards, buried beneath asteroid bots, concealed within gas giant rings, activated in unison. Prototypes we had never cataloged powered up, their output curves exceeding projections by orders of magnitude. Humanity had not been idle during negotiations.
They had been listening. They had studied our fleet doctrines, our engagement ranges, our dependence on centralized command structures. They had watched as the galaxy dismissed them, and in that dismissal, they had found time to prepare. When the first Concorde Armada translated into Earth's system, its commanders expected a broken world, a humbled species, perhaps even gratitude for our restraint. Instead, they were greeted by silence. No hails, no surrender signals, only a growing distortion across their sensor arrays, localized, unstable, expanding. I felt a chill ripple through my carapace as the data resolved. Humanity had deployed something new, something deliberately unseen. The war was about to begin in earnest, and for the first time since the fleets had launched, a realization spread through the upper echelons of the Concorde. We had not come to suppress a threat. We had come to awaken one. The war would not be swift, and it would not be merciful. The first human counteroffensive did not begin with a battle. It began with disappearance. One moment, the Concorde's third suppression armada filled the Sol system's outer boundary, thousands of vessels in immaculate formation, their hulls gleaming with the confidence of inevitability. The next, entire sensor clusters went blind. Not jammed, not destroyed. Gone. I was stationed aboard a fortified relay node far beyond the engagement zone, tasked with observing and recording humanity's collapse. Instead, I witnessed the collapse of everything we thought we understood about war. No warning shots were fired, no declarations issued. Space itself betrayed us. Localized gravity wells ignited inside the Armada's formations, artificial, sudden, impossible. Ships designed to withstand stellar tides were crushed inward as if seized by the fist of a newborn singularity. Battle lines folded, carriers collided with their own escorts. Crews never even had time to scream before space-time twisted them into silence. Command vessels attempted to regroup. They never finished the maneuver. From beyond visual range, relativistic kill vehicles struck. Dense masses accelerated to fractions of light speed, invisible until impact. There was no explosion, no dramatic flare, just absence. A command carrier one instant, a scattering of atomic debris the next, smeared across vacuum like a forgotten thought. 6 minutes. That was all it took for an armada refined over centuries to cease existing as a coherent force.
Human ships emerged then, not in neat formations, but in chaotic vectors that defied predictive algorithms. They darted, vanished, reappeared. Some burned hard toward targets with reckless abandon. Others cut engines entirely, drifting cold and silent before striking from impossible angles. Their vessels were not beautiful. They were overbuilt monstrosities, layered with redundant systems upon redundant systems, hull plating thick enough to survive direct impacts that would have vaporized Concorde cruisers. Power cores pushed far beyond safety tolerances. Nothing optimized for elegance, everything optimized for endurance. They reflected their creators perfectly. Still, amid the devastation, something far more unsettling became clear. Humanity was holding back. They bypassed civilian infrastructure without hesitation. Orbital habitats went untouched. Trade stations were ignored. Population centers, so often collateral damage in galactic conflict, were conspicuously absent from their target lists. Every strike was deliberate. Every target was military. Every maneuver carried an unspoken message, broadcast louder than any transmission. We could end this faster. We choose not to. Among my people, restraint is a sign of weakness. Among humans, it was something else entirely. Control. They were not venting rage. They were shaping the battlefield into a warning.
captured transmissions provided deeper insight into their doctrine, and what we found unsettled even the most calloused analysts. Humanity did not believe in fair fights. Their strategic principle was brutally simple. Survival justified asymmetry. They layered electronic warfare atop physical annihilation, drowning Concord command networks in contradictory data, while autonomous human drones exploited the confusion. Their artificial intelligences were not sovereign minds. They were tools, shackled by human oversight, unleashed only within tightly defined parameters. Humans did not worship their machines. They commanded them. Even more disturbing was their willingness to sacrifice. Human captains deliberately rammed crippled ships into enemy formations to create debris fields. Entire squadrons executed one-way maneuvers to delay Concord reinforcements, buying minutes for evacuations elsewhere. Individual loss meant nothing. Species survival meant everything. Among my people, such thinking is incomprehensible. We revere continuity, lineage, the preservation of cultural identity across epochs.
Humans were different. Their history was a chronicle of near erasure followed by reinvention. They did not cling to what they were. They endured what they must. System after system fell. Defensive grids collapsed under tactics never anticipated by Concord simulations. Static doctrines failed against dynamic chaos. Fleets accustomed to overwhelming superiority found themselves hunted by vessels that treated desperation as an advantage. Panic spread, not among civilians, but among admirals. For the first time in living memory, elder races began issuing retreat orders, not to regroup, but to survive. Strategic councils convened emergency sessions, their ancient confidence eroding with every incoming casualty report. And yet, humanity did not pursue indiscriminately. They advanced, then paused. Advanced again, then halted, always just far enough to prove dominance, never far enough to invite annihilation. They were no longer reacting to our moves, we were reacting to theirs. It was then I understood the true moment the war was lost. Not when fleets were destroyed, not when defenses failed, but when humanity crossed a psychological threshold from which there was no return. They were no longer fighting for acceptance. They were no longer fighting to prove they belonged among the stars. They were fighting to ensure that no force, ancient or newborn, would ever again decide Earth's fate without Earth's consent. In the final moments of that first counteroffensive, a human broadcast pierced every Concord channel simultaneously. No encryption, no flourish, just words. "We offered peace," the message said. "You chose control." The signal cut out, and in the silence that followed, as wreckage drifted where armadas once ruled, the galaxy finally understood its error. We had not awakened a sleeping power. We had forged a permanent one, and humanity was only beginning to show us what that truly meant. Every war has a moment when history splits, when events before and after can no longer be reconciled. For our war with humanity, that moment had a name: Kairos Gate. For over 8,000 cycles, the gate had been the galaxy's spine, a titanic subspace aperture anchored by artificial singularities. It linked 12 major trade corridors and fed the economies of half the Concord. Entire civilizations had risen around its traffic. Entire wars had been avoided because whoever held Kairos controlled the flow of existence itself. It was, by all accepted doctrine, unbreakable. The Concord fortified it accordingly. Layered defense platforms, redundant command nexuses, a permanent fleet presence drawn from the eldest races. No enemy in recorded history had even attempted a direct assault. Humanity did not assault it. They studied it. I was present in the strategic observatory when the first anomalous readings appeared, subtle fluctuations within the gate's subspace lattice, so minor they were initially dismissed as sensor noise. Humans had captured a damaged Concord battleship weeks earlier. We assumed interrogation, reverse engineering. We were wrong. They sent the ship back. At sublight speed, engines cold, broadcasting a standard distress beacon. Automated defenses tracked it, analyzed it, dismissed it as harmless debris. It crossed the exclusion perimeter unchallenged. Then its core went critical. The detonation did not explode outward, it collapsed inward. The human engineers had synchronized the starship's annihilation with the gate's singularity harmonics, forcing a resonance cascade. Subspace screamed, the lattice fractured, space folded, tore, and failed. What followed was not destruction, it was amputation. Kairos Gate ceased to exist. In its place remained a wound in reality, an unstable scar of twisted spacetime that devoured anything foolish enough to approach. Trade routes vanished instantly. Convoys in transit were erased mid-translation. Entire supply chains died in a heartbeat. Markets collapsed before news even arrived. The galaxy reeled.
Panic propagated faster than light through emergency relays. Civilizations dependent on Karos spiraled into resource crises within days. Ancient alliances accused one another of complicity. Border defenses turned inward as trust evaporated. For the first time in recorded history, the Concord did not debate how to win a war. It debated how to survive losing one. Whispers of surrender spread through chambers that had never known the concept, not to preserve lives, those were already being spent, but to preserve relevance, to ensure the Concord remained something more than a historical footnote authored by a young species we had dismissed. Amid the chaos, I was reassigned. My new task was not military analysis, but psychological assessment. Why were humans fighting this way? The answer I delivered ended my career. Humans, I concluded, were not driven by conquest. They had shown no interest in territory, resources, or cultural dominance.
Their strikes were too precise, too limited for empire building. What motivated them was far more dangerous. Memory. Every destroyed habitat, every sterilized colony, every civilian casualty inflicted by Concord containment was recorded, archived, and preserved across human networks. They did not ritualize grief as we did. They weaponized it. Human leaders carried their dead forward like a ledger that demanded balance. They did not seek vengeance, but they did seek certainty. Certainty that what had happened could never happen again. When humanity finally addressed the galaxy, it was not from a throne or a battlefield. It was from Earth. A single representative appeared across every remaining channel. No banners, no triumphal music. The scars of war were visible behind them. Damaged cities, orbital wreckage, a planet still burning in places. Their voice was steady. "We will end this war," the humans said. No threats followed. None were needed. Human fleets advanced to the edge of Concord space and stopped. Weapon systems powered down, visibly, deliberately. Targeting arrays remained locked. It was a gesture the galaxy instantly understood. This was not mercy. It was control. Humanity had positioned itself such that annihilation was possible at any moment, but withheld by choice alone. They no longer needed to fight. The war's outcome had already been decided at Karos Gate. They had surpassed us not only in weaponry, but in strategy. They had attacked the idea of inevitability itself, proving that even the galaxy's most sacred structures could be broken with patience, understanding, and resolve. In that stillness, as fleets hovered and worlds held their breath, a terrible realization settled over every species that could still think clearly. Humanity had won the war without finishing it. And in doing so, they had claimed something far more enduring than territory. They had claimed the future. What came next would not be negotiated. It would be dictated. Judgment did not arrive with fire. It arrived with terms. The galaxy had expected humanity's victory to end the way all others had, with conquest, tribute, and the slow rewriting of borders. That expectation revealed how little we had learned. When Earth finally spoke again, it was not to demand obedience, but to impose structure. The terms were transmitted across every remaining Concord channel, translated into thousands of languages, stripped of symbolism and flourish. They were stark in their simplicity, and in that simplicity lay their terror. No empire would ever again wield unilateral authority. No species would be denied representation based on age, scale, or military power. All major technological advancements would fall under shared oversight, erased while others watched and calculated. They showed us projections of their future that had almost come to pass. Earth rendered uninhabitable by its own excesses, humanity reduced to scattered remnants because no one had intervened soon enough. This, the human representative said quietly, is what unchecked power does. We know. Elder races objected. They cited millennia of stability, traditions older than human civilization itself. They spoke of stewardship and proven governance. Humanity listened. Then they displayed the simulations. Not weapon schematics, not invasion plans, forecasts. They showed what would happen if the galaxy rejected these terms, not in vague threats, but in precise, dispassionate modeling. Economic collapses cascading from destabilized trade routes, resource wars igniting along ancient fault lines, defensive alliances fracturing under pressure until conflict became inevitable. And finally, at the end of every projection, the same result appeared. Humanity would intervene. Not immediately, not dramatically, but decisively. The room fell silent. These were not threats. Threats could be ignored or resisted.
These were inevitabilities, mapped by a species that had already proven its capacity to reshape reality itself. The vote was called sooner than expected. No speeches followed. No delays were requested. One by one, ancient powers cast their assent, some in resignation, some in relief.
Some in quiet terror of what refusal would invite. The measure passed, unanimously. Within a single cycle, humanity did something no conqueror in galactic history had ever done. They withdrew. Forward fleets disengaged from Concord space. Occupation forces, few as they were, stood down. Human vessels returned to Sol or dispersed along neutral corridors. Defensive arrays remained operational, but inactive. Earth did not withdraw because it was forced to. It withdrew because it had already proven the point. Their power did not depend on proximity. It depended on certainty. The galaxy now understood that humanity could return at any time, in any configuration, with consequences no one wished to test again. Deterrence replaced domination. For the first time in our recorded history, galactic order was not structured around the fear of ancient empires, but around respect for resilience, around the understanding that survival, hard-earned, scarred, and remembered, conferred authority no age could match. Humanity did not seat itself upon a throne. They refused every title offered: overlord, arbiter, supreme custodian. Instead, they insisted on a role that unsettled us far more: guardian. A guardian does not rule. A guardian watches. As the chambers emptied once more, I realized the true weight of what had occurred. The galaxy had not been conquered. It had been corrected by a species that understood the cost of letting power go unchecked because it had nearly destroyed itself learning that lesson. We did not choose humanity to lead us. We chose them to stop us from repeating our worst mistakes. Whether we wanted their vigilance or not, Earth now stood between the stars and their own self-destruction, and none of us could pretend we did not understand why. Memory is the galaxy's longest weapon. Cycles have passed since the war with humanity ended, not in victory, not in surrender, but in redefinition. Borders have stabilized. Trade has resumed along newly mapped corridors. The scar where Karos Gate once existed still twists space itself, a permanent reminder that even the galaxy's foundations are not immutable. Human fleets are rarely seen now, yet humanity is everywhere. Their presence lingers not as warships in orbit, but as doctrine etched into the systems we use to govern ourselves. Conflict resolution protocols now assume escalation will fail and prioritize resilience over dominance.
Emergency response coalitions are structured around human redundancy principles: multiple backups, decentralized authority, failure anticipated rather than denied. Even our defense networks have changed. Where once we relied on overwhelming force, we now rely on survivability. Systems designed to keep functioning after catastrophe. Strategies built to endure loss rather than pretend it will not occur. This is humanity's quiet occupation of the galaxy. Children across the stars study Earth's history as part of their foundational education. Not the war alone, but what came before it. The long sequence of disasters that should have ended humanity and did not. Plagues that reshaped societies, environmental collapse reversed too late, conflicts that erased cities yet failed to erase the species. They are taught a lesson our own histories often obscure. Suffering does not always weaken. Sometimes it forges. Unity born of comfort is fragile. Unity born of necessity can defy time itself. Humanity learned that truth the hardest way possible, and now the galaxy carries it forward in its institutions, its safeguards, its collective memory. I have walked among humans since those days, not as an observer behind armored glass, but as a guest beneath their open skies. I have watched them laugh, loudly, without restraint. I have listened to them argue over trivialities with the same intensity they once reserved for survival. I have seen them build endlessly, layering innovation upon innovation, never satisfied with what already works. They remain flawed, they remain dangerous, but now they are consciously so. Humans speak openly about their capacity for destruction. They do not mythologize their restraint as virtue. They treat it as discipline, something that must be practiced, maintained, and enforced upon themselves as much as upon others.
That honesty unsettles many species more than any weapon display ever could. The galaxy sleeps more peacefully now, not because humanity is benevolent, benevolence fades, but because humans remember what it means to be powerless. They remember the terror of watching forces beyond their control decide their fate, and that memory informs every system they help maintain. They do not guard the stars out of altruism, they guard them out of recognition, because they know that the moment suffering is forgotten, it will be repeated. Humanity offered peace once, the galaxy refused, and in that refusal, it learned why humans are special.
Not because they seek war, not because they excel at it, but because when pushed beyond endurance, they do not collapse or submit. They adapt, they persist, they reshape the environment that threatened them until survival becomes inevitable. This is humanity's legacy. Not domination, not conquest, but permanence. As long as the stars burn and civilizations rise with the dangerous belief that they are eternal, humanity's story will be remembered, not as a warning against defiance, but as a lesson in what resilience, carried far enough, can achieve. The galaxy will never forget humanity, because forgetting them would mean forgetting how close we all came to learning that lesson the hard way. If you ask me now what defines humanity, I will disappoint you. It is not their strength, though they possess it in terrifying measure. It is not their intelligence, though it adapts faster than most species can legislate. It is not even their resilience, though they have turned survival into an art form. What defines humanity is choice. I did not understand this at first. Most species believe they choose their paths, but in truth they follow instinct, tradition, or survival imperatives encoded long before self-awareness. Humans are different. When faced with catastrophe, they do not simply react, they decide. Again and again, when extinction loomed close enough to feel, humanity chose unity over annihilation. They chose preparation over hope, because hope had failed them too many times. And most unsettling of all, they chose memory over forgiveness. They remember everything. Not to hate, but to prevent repetition. Humans are not heroes. Heroes act once and are remembered kindly. Humans are survivors, and survivors build systems so they never have to rely on heroism again. They assume failure. They plan for betrayal. They expect that good intentions will eventually collapse under pressure. And so they design the future accordingly. This is why survivors do not gamble their future twice. The galaxy once believed humanity was too young to matter, too volatile, too fractured. We measured them by the length of their history rather than the density of their experience. We mistook youth for weakness and scars for instability. We were wrong. Humanity mattered because they refused to disappear quietly. Because when fear spread among the stars, they learned faster than it could.
Because they understood a truth most ancient species had forgotten. Peace without strength is not peace. It is a delay. Earth did not conquer the stars. They never planted flags or demanded worship. They did something far more permanent. They convinced the galaxy, through action rather than proclamation, that challenging them was irrational. Not suicidal. Irrational. Because humanity does not fight to win today. They fight to ensure tomorrow is already decided. I have watched the Concord Chambers since then. When human delegates speak, no one interrupts. Not out of awe, not out of fear. Those emotions fade with time. What remains is understanding. Every species present knows that humanity will not overreach, they will not dominate, but they also know, with absolute certainty, that humanity will not be cornered again. Any attempt to coerce, isolate, or correct them will be met not with fury, but with preparation already completed long ago. This is the final truth about humans. They do not seek control, they seek assurance. Assurance that no voice will be silenced because it is small, that no species will be deemed expendable because it is inconvenient, that no civilization will be contained for the comfort of another. Because once, they were nearly erased for being inconvenient. Once, they offered peace and were told it was premature. They learned from that moment. Now, when humanity speaks, the galaxy listens. Not because humans demand it, not because they threaten it, but because every species understands what happens when a survivor is forced to choose again.
and humanity will always choose. That is why they endure. That is why they matter. And that is why, long after empires fade and stars grow cold, the galaxy will remember the day it learned, too late, but not too late to survive, that humans were never special because they were kind. They were special because they refused to disappear.